And joining us now is the man of the weekend here at BYU, newly inducted Hall of Fame member of BYU Athletics, Trevor Matich, is back for a loaded edition of Matich Monday. Trevor, good to see you again. Felt like you were just here.
I kind of just was. So you did a great job emceeing that whole thing, Spencer. Listen, knowing how those things work, I know the things that you smoothed over. You did a fantastic job.
I appreciate that. And just a great weekend overall to celebrate you, not only here in Provo, but your colleagues on ESPN as well, who put out a well-deserved piece for you talking about you being inducted into the BYU Athletic Hall of Fame. You didn't know it was coming. What was that like for you when you were on the air and watching that all unfold?
Yeah, they had all the guys from studio, just say kind things. And I tell you, it got me kind of a little misty just because to hear so many people that you work with say such nice things all in a row and not expected. It was wonderful. But it also made me think of, how I got to that point. And really it's a progression. I mean, it's all about the team, right? And when you look at our national championship year, that was my foundation for much of the success and many of the things that I've been able to do since. And you look at that team, though, it wasn't in a vacuum. I mean, you look at the teams that got progressively better, progressively higher ranked, progressively more, drew more attention nationally under quarterbacks Gary Shaddy and then Gifford Nielsen, Mark Wilson, then Jim McMahon, then Steve Young when we finished in the top 10, Steve's senior year. And then the next year was Robbie Bosco, a quarterback in the national championship. And so we were part of a progression. I was part of that team. And every time those guys said nice things about me, I was grateful for it. But it also made me think of all those guys that built us to the point that I was able to even be there.
Those were special teams, and you're a special player and guy, Trevor. It was an awesome weekend to celebrate you and that Hall of Fame class. It was great. Also great, Saturday night, BYU's performance against TCU in a 44-13 win. 13 points for TCU, a season low. Josh Hoover only completes 10 passes. What impressed you the most?
Well, defense, how about that? We start there. The defense did overall a very good job, especially bouncing back from the overall loss to Texas Tech. Defense actually did most things very well against Texas Tech. They continued that forward. The offense, turning it around, I think was the most impressive single thing. And they just got mad. I mean, it was so much fun to watch the BYU offensive line against TCU because the Texas Tech front got the better of them the week before. In this one, the offensive line looked like they just played like cavemen. They were just angry. They just refused to be beat. And they took out their anger on a TCU defensive front that is very, very good, especially against the run. No sacks allowed by the BYU offensive line, and that was fantastic. Our defense, BYU's defense, got 4 against TCU. So it was just a terrific performance in the trenches. And I think that's a big part of this because it showed BYU, it showed themselves that they're better than they showed against Texas Tech. It showed the world that they're better than they were against Texas Tech. And I think that is a really good thing to get on paper, to get on tape, so that people realize that this team is different from what they saw 2 weeks ago.
Trevor Matich of ESPN is on BYU Sports Nation. Okay, in the college football playoff rankings conversation and where it matters so much right now for BYU, how do you feel like Saturday's win impacts the Cougars in that regard and the conversations moving forward before the reveal of the rankings on Tuesday?
Well, I think it helps the committee if they're positively inclined toward BYU, and I think they are. I think they're impressed. I think they respect what BYU has done this year. Then the Texas Tech thing happens. And I think this win as a bounce back is important for the committee to see. And then from just a standpoint of the math of it all, Texas picking up their third loss to Georgia helps BYU. Alabama losing to Oklahoma, I don't think helps BYU as much because I don't think Alabama will fall behind BYU. Alabama has got some amazing wins. I mean, they won all in a row. Georgia, Vandy, Missouri, Tennessee, South Carolina, LSU, right? And they ended up losing to Oklahoma, but I don't think that'll help BYU as much. But when you look at what happened ahead of BYU, it puts them in position to be able to get into that top 10. And being in the top 10 is what's most important, because remember that it's not just the top 12 teams that are in the playoff. It's the top 5 highest ranked conference champions, then the rest to fill out the 12. And right now, the ACC champion is likely to be ranked behind BYU. They would jump up ahead into the top 12. And the Group of 5 champion, whoever that will be, is likely to be, or definitely is guaranteed to be behind BYU in the ranking. They will jump into the top 12. So being 11 or 12 is not safe. You got to be 10 or higher to be relatively safe in that ranking. And so that's what BYU needs to do. Keep winning, but as you look as a fan at the math of it all, look at the teams ahead of BYU that need to lose for them to get into the top 10, and look at the teams behind BYU that will jump them potentially, and that's what you have to be worried about.
Should BYU be ranked higher than Notre Dame? Notre Dame has 2 losses. They're notable losses against in close games, against Texas A&M and Miami. But BYU has a better overall record. They have 1 less loss. They have a better strength of record. They have a better strength of schedule. Should BYU be ranked ahead of Notre Dame?
I think you can make a good case for that. I think the committee looked at those first 2 losses against Miami and Texas A&M, lost both of them by a combined 4 points, with a true freshman quarterback starting his college career against those 2 teams. Now, that freshman quarterback for Notre Dame, C.J. Carr, did a very good job in both of those games. But had he been more experienced, could he have done even better and overcome a 3-point loss to Miami and a 1-point loss to Texas A&M? Well, since then, Carr has continued to improve. Notre Dame has continued to improve. And they've got wins over USC, and then they just beat number 22 Pitt into the turf. They just stomped Pitt. And I think that the committee looks at those 2 aspects and justifies having Notre Dame ahead of BYU, even though they have 2 losses to BYU's 1 so far. So you can make a case for BYU to be ahead of Notre Dame, but I think the committee's rationale over having Notre Dame ahead right now is pretty strong.
Trevor Matich is back on BYU Sports Nation. Now the Cougars turn the page to Cincinnati in a do-or-die game for the Bearcats on their home field, Trevor. So how do you like the matchup for BYU with some momentum after the TCU win, but having to go back again on the road for another tough road challenge?
Well, this is another tricky game for BYU. TCU was tricky, and BYU obviously prevailed, did very well. Cincinnati's also tricky, and it's for similar reasons, in that the Cincinnati offense is still one of the most explosive in the Big 12. They lead the Big 12 in yards per pass attempt. They're second to Utah in yards per rush attempt. This is a big play offense. TCU is a big play offense. And even though it didn't look like it, they actually got some big plays against BYU. I mean, Josh Hoover, TCU quarterback, only completed 10 of his 23 passes. But the receivers that caught balls, they averaged 18 yards per catch. They just weren't able to finish drives because BYU stopped them on 3rd down. They converted 1 of 10 third downs. Right. And the running game, TCU kind of had to abandon that when they got way ahead, but they still ran well from a standpoint of the top 2 running backs. The top 2 TCU running backs each averaged over 6 yards per carry. So now, again, though, they couldn't sustain drives. BYU won the situational moments. So now they face a similar situation against TCU with an explosive pass attack led by an experienced quarterback in Brendan Sorsby and an explosive running attack. And so the defense will have to lock in once again. They did it against TCU by stopping them on 3rd down and by keeping them from sustaining drives and sacking the quarterback, by the way. 4 sacks against TCU was phenomenal. They'll need to do the same thing against Cincinnati because Cincinnati can move the ball and they can score. People say, yeah, well, they lost against Arizona last week, and they did. But they threw an interception on their first play, Cincinnati did, gave Arizona a short field, scored a touchdown 2 plays later, and Cincinnati lost that game by 6 points on a day when they spotted the opponent 7 right off the bat. So don't put too much into that loss to Arizona. This is still a dangerous team. Cincinnati, their defense is not as good as TCU's. So I think BYU should be able to move the ball on the ground, and they should find space downfield. And Bear Bachmeier was phenomenal at throwing the ball deep down the field against TCU. He'll need to do that again against Cincinnati.
Do you feel like there's a at-large case for BYU should they not? Let's say they win the next 2, they go to the Big 12 title game, and they play Texas Tech. If they lose, is there a scenario where if it's close that they actually get an at-large and are in the top 10? Because I'm not feeling great about it based on the fact that BYU's 9-1 and still outside the top 10, probably at 11 tomorrow night. I'm hoping they get into the college football playoff. But, Trevor, it's a little frustrating because I'm not sure BYU can be much better the last 2 years. And if they don't have a playoff appearance in these 2 seasons, that would be very disappointing given how good they've been.
Well, last year the Big 12 only put one team into the playoff, and that's something that that BYU. I mean, they don't need to think about that now, but I think fans could look at that and say, let's not be 10-2 and having that large, being in that large pool. Let's have BYU win the conference, right, and get a guaranteed bid. And that's something that obviously they're shooting for. But when you talk about what the fans would be thinking about relative to an at-large, BYU fans need to be massive Oregon fans, or excuse me, USC fans, because USC goes to play Oregon. Oregon right now is above BYU, but if USC beats Oregon, then I think Oregon drops below a 10-2 BYU. And it's same thing with the Egg Bowl with Ole Miss. I'm sorry, I'm still tired from last weekend and all the travel. Ole Miss is playing Mississippi State, which is a massive rivalry game. And Ole Miss, if they lose to Mississippi State, who's unranked, and that might happen because this is a vicious rivalry, that would help BYU. So BYU fans need to be huge fans of USC and Mississippi State to start with, because those are 2 of the more likely losses that teams ahead of them could pick up.
Ah, yes, the old rootables and which teams BYU needs to root for in this conversation. Trevor, again, congratulations on just a remarkable weekend and career for you. And the best part is you're still going. You're still doing the thing, man. So I'm not sure what else you want to try and do in this life, because you've hit a home run thus far. But it's been an amazing ride, and we're so glad that you're with us on BYU Sports Nation.
I've been very blessed, and I still have a long ways to go. Thanks, guys.
The great Trevor Matich of ESPN on BYU Sports Nation, and a Hall of Famer to boot.